The only problem that I'll say is that things are moving too slow. On the one hand, we have a regulator in India, which is obviously working in the right-ish direction. But on the other hand, we have regulators like, let's say, MAS, for example, in Singapore. And they have this huge ecosystem and in which they are regulating not just blockchain companies, they are regulating pretty much every other financial entity out there. It's probably simpler for them because they don't really have to manage a scale that the regulators in India have to. But I'll say the movement any which ways has been slow. Even in US, the SEC actually moved faster than how Indian regulators have on this front. And I think there has to be a sense of urgency in which how they sort of address these problems today. Otherwise, you'll see a lot of implementations which would not ever fructify. I mean, it's one idea to just leave a totally unregulated market out there, and a second idea to protect a customer. I think we have to actually put our foot down and come up with specific regulations. When we talk about banks or financial companies, they are coming from a point of view that blockchain is going to solve a lot of their operational inefficiencies and in a way probably also drive growth. So that's where they are coming from. Regulators unfortunately don't take that view. For a regulator, if the requirement is for you to have an end-to-end physical copy of a customer onboarding, then you have to do it. And not purely from an operational perspective, it's also to make sure that banks actually do what they're supposed to do. So you have to understand that regulators come from a point of view where they have to protect the eventual consumer of these services. So they are protecting the retail customers. Unfortunately, this protection is not really in there in the regulations that we see. I mean, instead of, I'm not really a proponent of cryptocurrency per se, but I still feel that instead of making it a totally unregulated market, if you really want to protect the retail customers, then you should have specific regulations targeting those customers. In Singapore, for example, MAS specifies that you can set up any kind of entity out there, but if you are offering any kind of tech token, a security, a utility, any kind of token out there, then you need to be registered with them. So that's the purpose of having a regulator. I'll say it's just like any decent game of checkers or poker. You put your money where your mouth is. So I think we've seen that with the life insurance consortium. So they were doing a lot of pilots and POCs last year, and I think they're trying to sort of come to the final stages of building a live production environment. So that's very encouraging. In terms of blockchain consortia for banks, we just talked about the BIC, which is the blockchain infrastructure company. So I think it's 10 Indian banks that have come together to form a company which would come up with use cases for blockchain. And it's not just the largest 5 or 10 odd banks. It's open to every bank to join, and they can become equal participants, equal shareholders in this company. So there is definitely buy-in from not just banks and the senior management, it's the entire ecosystem today. Because the BIC or the infrastructure company that gets created today will not just favor or benefit these couple of banks. It will be a huge times and effort saver from the regulators as well, because they now won't have to manage multiple different points of entry into the system. It can be just one. So there's definite buy-in from the large financial entities, and I think this has been historically true as well. If you look at any decent tech, I think banks have always been people at the forefront in introducing tech to the industry. I think while regulators have been laggards in India, in a way it's actually helped us as well. And I'm not saying this as an offhand manner. If you look at ICOs and the way they were happening all over the world for pretty much any kind of use case, you'll see that a lot of retail money went into these ICOs because people acting like, and decent people acting like sheep, following each other towards a larger money trail. So that is exactly how the ICO bubble went bust. So, and it did, right? And a lot of money was spent on these projects, and if you look at a lot of them, they raised something like $10–20 million each, and now those projects are nowhere. So in a way, by having a blanket ban on ICOs in the country, they probably helped the retail investor, but they in a way also missed out on getting access to a lot of liquidity in the system, which again, which is questionable, because that liquidity could come from sources which are not really bona fide. So I think when regulators frame these new regulations or any kind of regulation, they need to make sure that any kind of blockchain enabled system comes at least on par with what we have for IPOs. We already have something similar what SEBI does for startups. So right now startups can actually have an IPO if they want to. The only problem is the regulations regarding IPOs for startups are way too exorbitant for startups. So you need to actually find a rating model, a rating engine for these startups where they can list themselves and then directly find retail consumers. So I think that's a good place to start. Maybe have that in place and then we can go beyond that as well.